Hey, what's up guys? Chip here. Welcome back to another Pokemon TCG time capsule video where today we're going to be looking at another 2006 deck. First off, thank you guys so much for all of your support on my LBS video. Really means a lot. I can tell you guys really enjoy this series and I definitely want to continue to do more of it, and we're going to start it right off now with the deck that won the 2006 World Championships. This is actually the deck that Jason Klaczynski used to win his first World Championships. Of course, Jason, the three-time world champion himself. But yeah, he won his first World Championship in 2006 with this Mewtrick deck. This is actually the Worlds deck that was printed back in 2006. I love getting these Worlds decks. I think it's a really great, cost-effective way to play older formats, so I definitely encourage you guys to pick these up. Like, I mean, for example, like this deck plays 4 copies of Mew-EX, and this is like a $30 to $40 card now. Same thing with Rocket's Admin. This is like a $50 to $60 card. So by getting these World Championship versions of the decks, it's just so much cheaper, and it's a great way to still enjoy the old format. So definitely I would encourage you guys to do that, to pick these up if you have the chance. The decks themselves are a little expensive, but it's much cheaper than using the actual cards. So yeah, we're gonna look at the deck and see why it was so good. And yeah, we'll just kick things off, starting off with 4 copies of Electrike here with the Recharge attack. I'm just going to talk about Electrike real fast because it's one of the reasons the deck is good. You can attack on your first turn in this format, and Electrike's Recharge for 1 lightning lets you search your deck for a lightning energy card and attach it to Electrike, then shuffle your deck afterwards. And that is really good in combination, of course, with Mewtrick EX with Disconnect. We play 3 copies of these. Disconnect does 40 damage. Your opponent can't play any trainer cards except for supporter cards from his or her hand during their next turn. So just getting some good old item lock in there, actually just kind of referred to as trainer lock because stadiums back in this time were still just called trainer cards. So you did lock stadiums out of play as well. And while supporters are trainer cards, it does specifically say you can still play supporter cards, but you're just kind of limiting your opponent of being able to play stadium cards and item cards, and we'll talk about why that is really good, because we can lock our own stadium in play that really can just disrupt what our opponent is trying to do. And then of course we do have 4 copies of Mew-EX with that versatile Pokebody. Lets you use the attacks of any Pokemon in play. You do still need the necessary energy to use the attacks. So we can be disconnecting with Mew-EX, and this is kind of good because it can let us have different weaknesses that we can hit for. There's a lot of Psychic weak Pokemon in the format, so Mew-EX is good for that. Mewtrick EX has like a different weakness. Itself is weak to fighting as opposed to Psychic, so that's a little better as well. So you can kind of manage which one of these you want to attack with depending on the specific matchup. And yeah, you can also use Recharge with Mew-EX. Recharge does say attach the lightning energy to Electrike, but it kind of functions the same way as that attack would function nowadays, where it would say this Pokemon. So you can, even though it says Electrike, you can use Recharge with Mew-EX and attach straight to the Mew-EX. That was kind of like a interesting wording of cards back in the day. And speaking of interesting wording of cards, we've got Roselia from Legend Maker. The Pokebody here is not relevant. It's here for Flick Poison. Switch one of your opponent's benched Pokemon with one of the defending Pokemon. Your opponent chooses the defending Pokemon to switch. So that may sound confusing at first, but you actually do get to choose which Pokemon on the bench you want to bring up. And the reason for that is because back in this format, there actually was a rule set for a doubles format. This is around the time that Ruby and Sapphire came out. That's one of the things that game introduced, was a team battling format. So that was kind of a similar thing that they tried to implement in the TCG. It was never competitive. I think it was just like a league for fun format. But the reason Flick Poison is worded the way it is because you choose the benched Pokemon. So we would pick like if this was the setup, we would pick a Pokemon from our opponent's bench, but they choose which of these 2 Pokemon that they want to send back. So that's why it's worded like that. You do get to pick the Pokemon that comes to the active spot from the bench though. So just something I wanted to clear up. That was something I was like definitely very, very confused by and had to get clarification for because it is worded so weird. But this can just be really good in specific scenarios. It's really good against things like, LBS. We can bring up the Blastoise and poison it in the active. It can't use the Energy Drain Poke Power while it's poisoned, so you can kind of stall out for a couple turns there if you need to. And it's just like a card that's randomly good, and we of course can use it with Mew-EX's versatile ability. We've also got Girafarig here with the rear sensor Pokebody. Each player's active basic Pokemon can't use Poke Powers, so lots of decks revolve around using Jirachi from Deoxys to get set up, which is a basic Pokemon that has a Poke Power. So if we can get a Girafarig down on the bench, we can just turn off that Poke Power. They can't use that Jirachi to set up, so really solid for that. We've also got Foresight. Look at the top 5 cards of either player's deck and put it back in any order, so you can kind of get like a lock going maybe on your opponent's side of the field, control what their top deck is. Or if you do start Girafarig, like I said, you can attack going first in this format, so we can use it to manage our top 5 and figure out what we want to switch to our top deck. We've also got 1 copy of Deoxys EX, and I think this is a card that ideally you wouldn't play in this deck, but you really just have to. You know, all LBS decks play Celebi EX, which has the Psy-Wave ability, I think, or Psy-Wave attack. The attack does 30 damage, and then you prevent all effects of attacks done to it by Pokemon EX. So we don't have a great way to hit that. We can hit it with Girafarig if we attach twice to it, but we can't hit it with Mew EX, we can't hit it with Mewtrick EX, but we can hit it with Deoxys EX with the Fast Wave attack, 50 damage. This attack's damage isn't affected by resistance, Poke Powers, Poke Bodies, or any other effects on the defending Pokemon. So we can hit through the effect of Celebi EX's attack, and of course we can use Mew EX to copy the Fast Wave attack. The Form Change Poke Power is not something we can really use. It lets you search your deck for a different Deoxys EX and trade it with this one. But we can use it once per turn to kind of like get a free deck search, kind of funny enough, so that is an option there. Then we've got 1 Regirock EX. I think this is a card that a lot of people have cut when they've rebuilt this deck and not used the World's cards. But it was a good... It's supposedly in here for the Raichu Exeggutor matchup. I'm not as familiar with that matchup. I actually haven't played that myself. I just finished building my Raichu Exeggutor deck, so I'm not sure how it comes into play yet, but Healing Stone is the Pokebody. At any time between turns, remove 1 damage counter from Regirock EX. So I think it's mostly here for that. And you also have Tonnage. You may do 60 damage plus 20 more damage if you do... Regirock does 30 damage to itself. So, you know, it's kind of just like a little bit of a healing option. I think Raichu Exeggutor can't really do a lot of damage outside of just spreading little bits of damage each turn and then trying to build up like 3 energies on a Raichu or something like that. And, you know, so I think that's what this is here for. But not totally sure because I haven't played the matchup yet. But this is the, like I said, the same list that Jason used to win Worlds. We've got 2 copies of Holland's Magneton. We talked about this yesterday, or the other day, excuse me, in the LBS deck. It's just, you know, 2 energy cards. It's a double rainbow energy. If we can attach it to one of our Pokemon. If we already have an energy attached to that Pokemon, then we just return that energy to our hand, and it provides 2 energy of any type. So can use this to throw down and use Disconnect. We can, you know, use it with Mew EX really, really well to copy something on our opponent's side if we want to. That's how we can attack with Tonnage on Regirock EX. So, and it is searchable with Professor Elms, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. Continuing on, though, we do have 4 copies of Rocket's Admin. Again, one of the reasons I like using the World's deck as opposed to using real cards is because of how expensive this card is nowadays. But yeah, it's the same thing as N, just so powerful in this deck. If we go down on prizes, we can always just admin our opponent to, you know, a low hand size, disconnect with a Battle Frontier in play, and then they're trainer locked and, you know, getting poked every single turn with a really low hand size. So admin is just super crucial to this deck's strategy. We've also got 4 copy of Professor Elm's Training Method. Search your deck for an evolution card, show it to your opponent, and put it into your hand. So we use this to get out our Mewtrick EXs on turn 2. 4 copies of it lets us get it as often as possible. And like I said, we can also search out the Holland's Magneton with it, so it's a way to search out energy cards. We've got 4 copies of TV Reporter. This was kept legal because of its print in Pop 2. Did go out of format from, you know, EX Dragon went out of format, but Pop 2 kept it standard legal for the 2006 season. Draw 3 cards, then discard 1 card from your hand. Just, you know, consistent drawing of cards is definitely always good. This is a card I'm excited to see come back into the standard format. We'll see how it performs. The format might just be a little too fast for TV Reporter, but in these slower setup-based formats, it's definitely really good. We've also got 3 copies of Scott. Search your deck for 3 cards in any combination of supporter cards, stadium cards. So we can search out our other supporters, so like, you know, we can get an admin for the next turn to limit our opponent's hand size. We can get an elm to find an energy for the next turn. We can get things like Battle Frontier or Cursed Stone, depending on what we're going up against. So just so many options with Scott, and you know, it just helps you get whichever supporter you need for the next turn. Just, you know, the format is just so much slower back then than it is nowadays, so you can afford to play more setup based supporters like Scott. We've also got one copy of Mary's Request. Draw a card. If you don't have any stage 2 evolved Pokemon in play, draw 2 more cards. So just drawing 3 off the top, pretty good. You know, we already play 4 copies of TV Reporter, so this is kind of like, you know, we needed one more draw supporter, so we threw in Mary's Request. We've got 4 copies of Dual Ball. Flip 2 coins, and then search your deck for as many heads as you get for a basic Pokemon. So if we flip 2 heads, we get 2 basic Pokemon, 1 heads, 1 basic Pokemon. This is how we can get our Electrics in play turn 1, or excuse me, Electrics in play turn 1 to use that recharge as quick as possible. And, you know, one card I'm kind of confused as to why Jason didn't play is Lapras from Legend Maker. You know, it's got the Stellar Guidance Pokepower, which is the same thing as Tapu Lele's Wonder Tag, lets you search your deck for a supporter. I feel like with Dual Ball, it would be a really good combo to just be able to get Lapras, put it down on the bench, and then get a supporter that you want for that turn. But, you know, Jason won the World Championships and didn't need it then. I think that if I went back and built this deck, that might be a card I would consider adding, though. We've also got 2 copies of POW Hand Extension. Talked about this card the other day in LBS, but really good here. This deck can go down in prizes early on in the game since we are attacking with EX Pokemon, and there's a lot of non-EX decks in the format. But you can only play it if you're behind on prize cards, and you get to choose one of these 2 effects. You can move an energy attached to your opponent's active to one of their benched Pokemon. So normally we use this to move an energy off of an attacker onto like a... from an attacker onto like a support Pokemon on the bench that they're not going to be able to attack with, or we can switch one of our opponent's benched Pokemon with their active, so kind of getting that catcher effect. 2 copies of Switch, just, you know, lets us get mobility, can help us get that turn 1 recharge off. That's super, super important, and can just be randomly good as well. And then we'll move on here to the Stadium cards. We've got 3 copies of Battle Frontier, which is why I think this deck is so good, is because of the existence of this card. Each player's colorless evolved Pokemon, dark evolved Pokemon, and metal evolved Pokemon can't use any Pokepowers or Pokebodies. Now that may seem extremely specific, but it is very, very good for countering the setup Pokemon of this format. Colorless obviously prevents Pidgeot's Quick Search, which we talked about in LBS, just being so good to set up Pokemon. Also Porygon 2's Download. I don't think it's Download. I don't remember what the ability is called. That lets you draw till you have 6, but limits that because it's a colorless evolved Pokemon. It turns off, you know, Dragonite's Dark Trance for the Dragtrode deck, and also Electrode's or the Energy Trance ability, I think is what it's called, and then Electrode's Pokepower as well. I keep saying ability, but it's Pokepowers. So it just has a lot of options there with the Dark type, and then of course Metal type as well can shut off the ability of Metagross Delta Species, which is very good as well. So just kind of limiting anything our opponent can do. Locking it in play with Disconnect is so good, and can just kind of leave your opponent helpless at times as well. And then 1 copy of Cursed Stone at any time between turns. Put 1 damage counter on... each player puts a damage counter on a Pokemon that has a Pokepower in play. So the only Pokemon we have with Pokepower is Deoxys, and we're going to try to not bench that unless we need it in that one specific matchup against LBS. And then in that case, we don't really use Cursed Stone as often. So yeah, you know, Cursed Stone's still just really good to spread damage and set up numbers for Disconnect later on. There's so many Pokemon that have Pokepowers in the format. Then we've got 4 copies of Multi-Energy. It is a Rainbow Energy, but you don't have to place a damage counter on the Pokemon when you attach the energy to it. But you can only use it as a special energy whenever... It only counts as a Rainbow Energy whenever there's no other special energies attached to the Pokemon. So we can't put 2 Multi-Energies on a Regirock to use Tonnage. We would have to do, you know, the Magneton plus a basic Lightning. So yeah, and Multi-Energy is also good just to be able to use things on our opponent's side of the field with Mew-EX. There's been random times where it's come up that it's been useful. And rounding the list out, we've got 4, 8, 9, 10, 11 basic lightning energies. And there it is, the Mewtrick deck that Jason Klaczynski used to win the 2006 World Championships. Really great deck. I think still one of the best decks in the format. Very fun to play. Not very fun to play against, but definitely one I would recommend for the 2006 format. Just such a powerful deck. So, as always, guys, if you enjoyed these TCG time capsule videos, please leave a like down below. Helps me out a ton. Lets me know that you're enjoying them. And I will try to get some matches uploaded for these formats very, very soon in the future. So definitely stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribed if you haven't, guys. And that's going to do it for me. Until next time, take care.